Are you ready, Jerry and crew?
We are ready.
Okay, so we'll officially start
Jerry's
the,
always ready.
what? So before you start, I'll do an intro here in a second. So everything that's been up to this point will cut, and then we'll start the recording that we'll put on the internet in a moment. So anybody who is not speaking as part of the presentation, I kindly request that you turn your mic off. So if you say huh and what comments or to yourself, then your face doesn't show up on the screen. I'm going to turn mine off as well. So Jerry, you have the floor. Welcome to the NARG meeting for September 2021. Our club members are going to share an exciting trip that they made down to Utah. So introduce yourself, Jerry, and take it away.
Okay, thanks very much. It was a fantastic trip, and looking forward to hearing from Robert especially. And I'm kidding him, of course. And David, you've got control from the standpoint of the PDF, so you need to take to start that baby. Jordan, where are you? Are you here?
I'm here.
Okay, got you covered. Mr.
Okay,
Stewart.
I need control or screen sharing, please.
I will see if I can give that to you. I handed over control to Greg as well. So let me see if one of the two of us are going to give it to you. I'm going to find where you are first.
I'm still disabled.
There you go.
Stop laughing, Jerry.
I'm just going to make you the host. So David, you're the host now.
Okay, thank you very much. And can you see my screen?
No.
Yeah.
No, we
See
just
you.
see your lovely face.
Can't see my screen? Can't see my PowerPoint?
No.
Well, I'm quitting then.
All right, we're doing this live.
How about now?
Getting close. It's coming.
Hey, there it goes.
So you got it?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yep, we're good.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting us do this. We've been talking about it quite a bit, and maybe as a way of a background here, we had the opportunity this spring to hear two great speakers. We heard Dr. Joe Sertage and also James Kirkland talk about dinosaurs, and I was pumped, really, and full of facts and looking for some kind of outlet. And Jerry said, hey, I'm working on this trip to Utah. You want to go? And I said, absolutely. And that's sort of what began the whole project. And what we have here this afternoon or this evening is really a PowerPoint or a travelogue. I've collected everyone's photos and the slides they've created, but I'm not going to give a lecture. That's way beyond me. What I'm going to do is host this travelogue and invite our participants to join in at any point. We still may actually have a visit by Dr. Josh Lively, who was the head of our expedition, our Sherpa, if you will, our cook and confidant through this week period. So he may still join us, and we'll introduce him if he comes. So what we're talking about is a travel of 100 miles, hundreds of miles really, in millions of years, going back through sites in both Nevada and in Utah. And this map here shows kind of our route through Oregon and Nevada, through Utah, and then back again. We'll be talking about waypoints along this map here and showing you what we saw. So we all left from various points in Washington and Portland, and we first met up in Winnemucca, where we overnighted, and then moved on to Carlin, Nevada. And in Carlin, we saw well-exposed angular unconformity where fossils were collected in the Tonka Formation, which is Mississippian, so a fairly long time ago. And we were able to collect a whole variety of specimens from corals, bryos, and brachiopods. The site that we were at in Carlin is viewed on this Google map picture. You can see the Humboldt River at the base, and then we made 2 excursions up the cliff. So the first one we went was frankly not very fruitful. We didn't find much. The second, when we went back down and up again, was quite good. Views of this site are quite picturesque. They're very interesting geology here. And these are taken from the roadside looking up. And you could see in the cleft on the picture of the right where that first descent was. I'll show you a picture here in a second of where the second one was as well. But ascending up on this slope, we went actually quite far up, and you could see some perspective here. You could see our cars down on the bottom. You could see the river in the foreground and the mountains in the back. So we actually went up fairly high here looking for our fossil finds. So we were in this kind of between the hogs back here up in the center. I don't know if you could see my pointer, but I'm trying to indicate that space in the middle. And just to show you a little more close-up views of the topology here, you can see that it was a pretty steep, very shaly type of rock. It was difficult traversing in a lot of areas, very slippery because the rocks were not very stable. Here's another closer view here showing, again, just some of the features. And then the second traverse was up on the side here. So 3 of us went the first way up. So Robert led us up and Jerry and I followed. And then when we came back down to ground level, we ran into Jordan and he had pockets full of fossils. And he said, "Where'd you get all those?" He said, "Well, they're laying all over there." And Robert says, "Come on, guys, we're going back up." And we did. And so we went up into this area here. And I'm going to stop just for a second because I know you were all up there. If you want to share anything about what you were seeing and what you were experiencing going up this slope.
Well, part of it, this is Jerry, and it seems like Robert took us up the wrong slot to start with. And so we went up that wrong slot, couldn't find anything except for rocks and a lot of slide area. So I just wanted to blame Robert. And then Jordan comes along and he says, "I'm going up this other drainage," and voila. And then Robert says, "Oh yeah, that's the right one." Hi, Robert.
Thanks, Jerry.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
It was full of stuff. And just I've got some pictures here just to show you. So here's some of the corals. And this was literally laying on the ground. And there are tons of them. And so here's some examples of the corals. And then here's some of the bivalves, brachiopods. There's some crinoids. I know, actually, Jordan, you found a lot more than I did. So what kind of things were you seeing up there?
Well, when I first went up, I wasn't seeing much. I kind of zigzagged my way all the way up to the top of the hill and found some calcified, like little, coral stems, all kind of in a not very pretty block. And once I got to the top and looked around, I started coming back down and found a bunch of horn corals and brachiopods weathering out of that drainage that you showed. And yeah, the horn corals were just, it's real gravelly in there between the hogbacks, and they just laying in the gravel. My favorite ones out of there were I found 3 little pieces of bryozoans, and I just couldn't believe that something that had that delicate a texture was that well preserved from that long ago. It's really cool.
Wow.
So go ahead, Jerry.
One of the things that it's really what I found was another great point is Jordan and Robert are like, God, I can't, they're mountain animals. Those guys are fast, they're leading the way, and the two of us, of course, we were just scratching along trying to keep up. But it's amazing because Jordan is extremely fit as well as Robert is. So if you go into that kind of country with Robert and Jordan, you probably not going to keep up.
That's for sure. You got to be in shape. I think
be in
we were
shape.
better in shape at the end of the trip than the beginning, but we did survive, and we then packed up and moved over to Wendover, Nevada, which is on the border there between Utah and Nevada, and overnighted there as well. We're looking for an area of Devonian limestones, and the night before, both Jordan and Robert checked out the outcrops and decided it wasn't a pretty good place to collect stuff. But in the morning before we departed Wendover, Robert said, well, we're here. Why don't I just show you where we were? And we said, absolutely, let's go see. So this map here is showing Wendover. And again, on the left, as you view your screen, you'll see Nevada, and then obviously on the right, the Utah border and the Wendover Airport. So the area of interest is that red circle there. And you can see how close it was to where we were staying. And perhaps a little closer view, give you a sense more of the topology there and this upslope where we were going to go. These two pictures were meant to give you a sense of what we were seeing. The picture on the left is actually in that outcrop on the incline moving up. And that grayish area is what we were really scouting through. It doesn't give a good sense of the elevation or the texture of the rock. The picture on the right is looking down again, and we were up at some elevation, but not very high. What we were seeing close up was something like this. So what I'm showing on the left is a picture of some of that limestone in situ, showing some of the fossil findings there, which were very eroded, relatively poor specimens. The thing that I took away from this part of the trip was how hard the rock was. And I think, Robert, you used that term microkarst because it was so hard and so angular, and it was sort of the kind of rock you'd cut yourself on. It's very tough to get anything out. On the right side is a piece of rock that I found separate, and just trying to show a little more detail of some of the fossils there. And you can see they're really bad specimens, but that's a view more close up of it. And thought was maybe we needed to go higher up in the formation there, get a better view of what the specimens would be. But frankly, we had bigger fish to fry, and we're going to move on to Salt Lake and then ultimately Green River. But I'll stop here and invite all you to share your impression of the site.
David, the rocks in that we're looking at are Devonian in age, and the Devonian in Nevada is very hard and very sharp because it does get a microkarst on it. And these particular rocks are almost vertical as they sit in the mountain range there. And the fossils, the sort of the curlicue fossils are, I think, they're a gastropod called Bellerophon. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Okay.
You didn't,
Jerry,
you didn't
you
want to fall
were,
down.
Jerry, you were with us on this part. I think Jordan had moved on, but what, do you have any impressions, observations? Okay.
Yeah, my impression was unquestionably just what Robert was saying. That stuff is so sharp. I mean, my your shoes do not slip, nothing to slip on except for your whole body. And it was a constant, thing just to say, hey, to keep from tripping. And once you put your hands down, you know, and that kind of stuff, I was wearing gloves, you know, like my normal work gloves. And but it was still, it's very rough, but extremely interesting. I just love that kind of fossiliferous condition. It's beautiful, actually.
We didn't collect any fossils from there the evening before, but Robert and I did find some ripple marks, which I thought was really cool.
Oh, cool.
And I found a really weird piece of chert, but not really a fossil in the macro sense.
So this was all a bonus to us. I mean, we're traversing through Nevada, and you know, these were extra sites and obviously different eras. And what I'm going to show you now is really the whole point of the trip, which was to go to the Green River area, Utah. And I'll show you another Google map picture here, but just to give you a sense of where we were, maybe a bird's eye view. We went to Green River, which is a very small town in Utah. Extremely nice folks, by the way. And it's a good recreation area. There's a lot of hiking and river runners there, rafters, et cetera. And we stayed, made camp really on the Green River at a place called Swayze's Beach, which you can see on the map. And it's nestled, the river there is nestled in the Book Cliffs, which have significant elevation. So that was our home base for the time we spent with Josh and his volunteer crew there. This area is extremely interesting. I'm not a geologist by any stretch, but for me, it's very picturesque, and it's nestled in the Book Cliffs. Book Cliffs are the Cretaceous sandstone, and they're called Book Cliffs because they resemble books on a shelf. At least that's what they say. And it's a huge formation going many, many hundred miles, western Colorado, into western Colorado and eastern Utah. It's the foreland basin of the ancient Western Interior Seaway. And that's relevant as we'll talk about the Mancos and what we found there. So it's a very picturesque, very interesting from a geologic point of view. So in the Book Cliffs, we were scouting the Nestlin Formation. At the base of the cliffs, the Mancos Shale, which is a very large desert area. And during this part of our trip, we actually split into two teams. So Robert and Jordan went up into the Nestlin, and Jerry and I spent the majority of our time in the Mancos. So we'll have two different groups commenting. This is a view from that campsite. And again, maybe a little better view of, again, the beauty of the area. It's just dramatic. And on the left, you could see the river and see the cliffs in the distance. And on the right is our campsite. I don't know if you could see Jerry there. You probably can't make out the expression on his face, but he seemed to be shocked when he realized that none of these youngsters knew anything about the Missoula floods. So he gave a lecture, a mini lecture on the Missoula flood. You could see how enraptured all these folks were while he explained, was it 92 separate floods? I forget, Jay, but it went on a while. But actually, there's a wonderful crew, wonderful people to meet from both Utah and from Colorado. young folks full of energy and information. So these are part of the group that we joined. And again, I just wanted to show more views here of the region, what we were looking at. And frankly, that's where the part of the crew ascended, behind those cliffs into the Neslin Formation, and we'll have more detail as we get into it.
David,
So-
before you get over but one of the things in the camping was that Josh did the cooking essentially. And what was really cool about it, of course, we stayed at a different location, but everyone camping there, and that's the norm for anyone working with Josh and the USU groups. Josh makes sure that that the kitchen is a single kitchen rather than having all your backpack full of crackers.
And I ain't exactly picky, but I thought the food was great.
I did too.
Me
Yeah.
too. It was great. Great camp food and great camaraderie, really.
Yes.
So, Jordan, you put this series of slides together. I
Yeah.
think they have something to do with geology, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I thought the book Cliffs were just absolutely fascinating from a sedimentological perspective. So sequence stratigraphy was sort of a synthesis of sedimentation and other tectonic studies that was coined as a term back in the 1970s. And it's really the study of, if you have, it's a sequence in this context is a series of rocks that are give or take conformable over one another, meaning there isn't a big chunk of time missing. You might get a little erosion on surfaces here and there, but for the most part, what you're looking at is just sediments that got dumped on each other, one after the other, and form a big pile. And the different units within that are showing you different environments as water goes up and down. You get a different flux of sediment in. So what you end up with is this big pile, and the different environmental, the different environments that are depositing these different rock units stack up like a book. And these are all representative of what's called the Mesa Verde group. And it's just fascinating to look at. This is something you don't get in Oregon. And so it was just great to look at. And so, as just between the two units that Robert and I spent most of our time in, the Sago Sandstone and the Neslin, what you're looking at is a beachfront in the Sago. And then there's a lens on top of that of this lagoon deposit where you're standing in the same spot, and what once was a beach was depositing this sort of lithic-y beach sand. Well, the ocean went out and was replaced by this terrestrial sort of backwater lagoon that had a very different lithology and different fossils as well. And so back when they were coming up with, what would come to be called sequence stratigraphy, the book Cliffs was actually one of two localities in the world that they sort of felt this out and tested it on. So it's really one of the type sections for looking at one place where an environment changed a bunch of different times, and that's very, very beautifully recorded in the rock record. So that was just great.
I'm going to move on. You tell me if I'm going too fast, Jordan.
No, sorry. Tell me if I need to shut up.
No. I love hearing it. Go ahead.
So stratigraphic sequence, you get the in the picture on your right, lower down, you've got the Sago, and then in the back that goes up into the Blue Castle tongue of the Castlegate sandstone, and you can just see that the rocks are different. And that's because, sedimentary rocks are, for most intents and purposes, they're laid down by water. and what kind of sediment is flowing in the water and how fast and often the water is moving is going to make a huge difference in what kind of rocks you get. So you get these beachy sands down at the bottom, and then that's going to be different than the deeper water Manco shale that was down below this, where Gerald and David spent most of their time. Yeah, so on the left, this is a cross section of most of the Mesa Verde group. You can see they've got the Manco shale down at the bottom, and then you get into the Black Hawk, which I believe is what we were camped on, was what we could see from there were cliffs in the Black Hawk formation. And then above that, you get the Castlegate sandstone, and you see there's just a little lens just right about in the center of the picture. That's that little bit of lagoon that was the Neslin. And then above that, you get the Tusher and Farrer formations that forms the very top of the cliffs we were looking at. And in the picture on the right, which is actually from a USGS report in the 1930s, they've got all the units labeled out, and it really hasn't changed since then. So that was just great to see. Yeah. So we would go up with Josh and park in the Sago, walk up through it, and get to the parts of the cliffs where the Neslin was weathering out and just walk along it. Yeah, so the Sago, and I spared you all the ternary diagrams of what exactly it's made of, but suffice all that to say, it was a fairly inactive beach, and it was not as much quartz as you would see on like the Pacific coast, because it was the Western Interior Seaway. So it's not quite as much wave action right on the beach as you would get somewhere like the Pacific, but it was a pretty active beach, and you get all kinds of great sedimentary structures. You get ripple marks, you get trace fossils, and it's mostly just sandy because all those waves are washing away anything organic that fell down there. But you get these in the picture on the right, you can see you get big hunks of just well-preserved sedimentary structures.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, the ripple marks were all over the place. I kept a couple because they were so good. But you can see the direction of flow is preserved. There were some pieces that I didn't get good pictures of, but they had multiple directions of flow on them from waves going back and forth on them. And you would get these big iron concretions. They look anthropogenic. They look man-made, but it's just this iron oxide, stuff leaching into the sand. It was just beautiful. I'd love to go back and spend a week just documenting the sedimentary structures there. Yeah, so you get most of the Sago had no fossils in it at all, but you'd find these little layers where, there'd be big chunks of wall just covered in these kind of poor quality bivalves. And I did find one chunk of bone. I don't know what kind of bone it was, but it was, I guess I didn't put anything for scale, but it was a big chunk of rock. And I was so excited, I packed it all the way down and tagged it for the museum. So I'm hoping at some point they'll tell me it's a crocodile or whatever. And then you would also see in some chunks these arthropod burrows called Ophiomorpha. And those are little, it looks like someone ran a little bike tire through sediment. And what that is it's a little kind of shrimp-like guy that would burrow in and live in the sand. And the texture is from their fecal matter that would line the burrow. And one thing I thought was interesting, I found out after I came back, I started researching these guys, and they don't really have that great of an idea what the organism was. It's a fossil that the burrow is what's named. They're not really sure what was making them, but they show up all over along the Western Interior Seaway. So I thought that was really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, Jordan, they are actually an indication of a beach environment.
Yeah. They're like those little, I forget the name. There's, modern critters that will just, burrow into the sand if you see them. And the Nestlin, as you can see lithologically, was a much more still, much more organic, rich lagoon deposit. So it wasn't very well connected to the main seaway, and a bunch of plants and animals and other organic stuff was falling in it, sinking to the bottom, and ended up making these coal seams that you can see one of the volunteers hacking into. In fact, when the USGS did that report back in the 1930s, they were exploring it for coal for economic purposes, and decided that it, I guess, really wasn't worth that much for coal. But because it was this nice still water that was very, very fine grained, it preserved some excellent fossils and was really fun to poke at. Yeah, on the left, you can see those black coal seams. There really seem to be two coal seams, a lower one and an upper one. And the group I was with spent most of a day walking laterally along the upper one, and there was just nothing. And the minute we popped down to the lower one, we started finding turtles and dinosaurs and plant fossils and all kinds of cool stuff. So yeah, it was just fabulous to look through. Yeah, you can see that bedding's really fine from stuff just slowly filtering down through the water. Yeah, remarkable stratification. Couldn't have put it better. Yeah, so a lot of the things we found weren't vertebrates. You get little conospiral gastropods. There were a couple that we found that had both ends, and Josh said those were good enough to be diagnostic, and so we bagged and tagged them and sent them back. This big old tree fossil Robert found, that was very cool. It was very big, so I think we left that where it was. And there were also a bunch of vertebrates. We found, I think, at least 3 turtles. We found what I think we decided was a croc tooth. And all over the place in this wall, you would find dinosaur long bones. And that was one of the most surreal parts of the trip, is you just walk along this cliff and you find this bone, like a log just sitting there. And you go, Josh, come here, I found a dinosaur. And he'd look at it and go, yep, it's not diagnostic and we can't get it out, move on. It was really encouraging. Oh yeah, we can go to the next one. It was just really encouraging, even if there weren't bones we could collect, to see like, oh, there's another one, that's a dinosaur.
So I have to say that as participants, this part of the trip wasn't for collecting. We all agreed that the museum would have first dibs on everything. So a lot of the things we found, we did bag and tag and gave to the museum for further examination preparation. So we don't have a lot to show you in a show and tell except pictures of things. But this view here really just caught my eye. And this is from within the Nestlin there, and we're looking out at a very locally famous formation. They call it the Nefertiti. Obviously, there's some people think there's a resemblance there, but it's a natural formation in the cliffs there. So that's views of the Nestlin, and here's just to show you again some more travel scenes here. This is leaving. You go up and down through the area in these washes. It's all four-wheeling. in and out in both areas, both the cliffs and the Mancos. But we weren't the first people there, obviously. There are other people ranching or mining in these areas. And it wasn't all geology, was it, Jordan? I mean,
It sure
one of the
wasn't.
nights, one of the
Two
nights,
of the nights, actually.
well, actually, they had a lunar eclipse, which no one could see because of the clouds, but you got a great picture of this.
Yeah, that was pretty great. That caused quite a stir. Because we're all sitting around a campfire and just chatting and swapping stories and entertaining each other. And it was just about the time that some of the people started going to bed, and this, like a big broken up meteor starts stringing across the sky, and it stayed there for 90, 120 seconds. And that's, how humans get when they see a big light in the sky. There's a bunch of hooting and yelling and pointing. And it was really exciting. I've only seen that a couple of times in my life, and we actually saw them 2 different nights go in different directions. It was just beautiful. And you can see it. Since it was so far away, because the rock was so big, it just was this string of like circular light slowly moving across the sky.
Right.
And if I hadn't seen it before, it probably would have freaked me out a little. But I just thought it was really exciting. It was just rock burning up as it entered the atmosphere.
So this might seem a little anticlimactic compared to the views you just saw, but for 4 of the days, Jerry and I spent our time in the Mancos exploring, and we did have an opportunity on Thursday to join the whole group up in the Book Cliffs there. But this is our view here of what we were seeing, and it's dramatically different. The left view here gives you a kind of the sense of the topology, but the desolation as well. It's a very dry and arid area. And there's Jerry walking to give you some scale of what these cliffs in the Mancos look like. And he's probably giving credence to the adage that all those who wander are not lost. He was exploring the base of the cliffs there. And frankly, that was the whole point of our visit with the museum folks. It was a discovery trip. They were looking for opportunities in the future, and obviously there's going to be quite a number of those. But this is our recounting of our time in the Mancos. And this is, I think, one of your pictures, Jerry, ascending up on one of the rises there and looking back now towards the Book Cliffs. You can see we're at a distance here, but you could then see in the foreground, more or less like the sand dunes here, consolidated areas of the shale looking back towards the cliffs.
David, do either of those have the, several of them I was doing video, especially in making comments, but I don't know whether that you were able to have that in the PowerPoint.
I couldn't put it in.
Okay.
But if you have them, we could do it at the very end. So here's another perspective view, and this is a cool one because you could see the Mancos, you could see in the near foreground the Book Cliffs, and then way in the background there, you could see help me, Jerry, what?
San
Rafael.
San Rafael, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That isn't the
Dark
San
on-
Rafael. This is looking east. So this is actually out towards Price in that particular view.
Yeah.
So I'm looking north, and I was on the east side of that hogback. And because we were looking at that point for the, we're just looking to see what is up there, in all honesty. We would move east of, there's another crew working, but we were moving east of the other crew. And so you can see to the left here, those little mounds are the lower segments of, I'm not sure what's under this hogback, but it's probably a mile walking over it, and you can see my footprints and things and other footprints as well. There were some critters that were had been going up on the hillside, right? But now you can see the Mancos. We're part of the Mancos there, but I'm looking for the clams, and which we'll talk about clams in just a little bit. But what I found fascinating is, as far as I could see there, that if I'm looking to of course, the book cliffs there, and if you look to the left, we're looking up towards Price. Of course, you can't see Price, but what you're seeing is this continuous mounds, those little yellow mounds, and it's just extreme erosion, wind particularly, is my guess. Of course, there has been some water erosion there too. But in that particular area, because it's been so dry, I was surprised there was so little dust. You did get dust in the areas where you were driving and crunching this stuff up, but not much dust up in that area. So this is the east side of that, the hogback. Like I said, it was about a mile of that. And again, the picture of the Book Cliffs there are just amazing. And then if you look further east, that's still into an area of the Book Cliffs. And in this particular area here, pardon me, I'm on the west side of those hogbacks. And we had driven up to an area where the other team was working in those little humps. Again, it was a particular layer that had a marine layer that had all the fossils. And I think, Dave, you've got some fossils to show. But yeah, there we go. And that layer, especially along that mile or so of that hogback, it had been highly eroded. So parts of it had been washed down. You can see elements of it coming into the foreground here, where my cane is, because that has just been it's air, it's heat, and water and constant erosion, and it's so hot there. It was one day, I guess it got up to 110. This particular area, and David, you may have some more information on it, but a layer, as far as I could see, so I'm up on the top and I'm looking down a bit because it's not right on the top of that hogback, but over maybe 10 to 15 elevation wise down, and you enter this layer of clams, and literally these are giant clams, and which we'll have more information on. But as far as I can see, I'm looking at, and once you get used to seeing this, at first when David and I were working with another Dave and Larry cramps, we saw these things and they were pointed out. And so David and I were saying, oh God, look at this. And we were sitting down and doing all this work. And those other guys were just thinking, it's so commonplace. They just let us learn by ourselves and learn our own. Go for it, dudes. Don't collect it though. So, but this was fascinating to me because these things were everywhere and on a particular layer of sediment, which makes sense. But as you will see some of it in some of the pictures coming up, but just fascinating.
They're on this level, characteristically, they look like mosaics, and they're all fragmented. But as Jerry said, they're very large, 4 and 5 feet large. But on this layer, because of erosion, that they're all fragmented, and they're very thin. So here's, I think this is, Jerry, you were digging down thinking you might want to try to get one out, but you're looking for a more solid, more consolidated or intact one. So there is some difference here. You could see kind of where they're hanging together.
I was doing some brushing there, and of course, I had a time to eat some snacks and water.
Yeah.
Left
This
it.
is a little better picture of some of the surface contour of a clam in situ here, and you could get a sense of the size from the trawl next to it. But obviously, we were not the first there to find these, and the museum had sent a crew out years before and actually excavated a specimen, a whole specimen, and preserved it. So again, ours was a trip of discovery. We didn't have plaster or anything to retrieve any specimens, but this is from the museum now. You could see a picture of what it looked like in situ, and then fully prepped and removed from its site and displayed in the museum. So these are called Platyceramus. And what is unique about them is first their size, but also the fact that in intact specimens, they are finding other fossils of fish and other marine creatures preserved in them. So this obviously was a fairly tranquil area, and it obviously provided a lot of nutrition for these clams to grow this size. So this is actually from the museum itself on view for the public. And I took this picture here, again, to show that mosaic appearance of these clams. And you could see how friable they are. If you try to unroof part of it, you're just going to get another set of tiles in effect. What was interesting to me looking at some of the specimens was, again, the thinness of the clam shell, and the fact that we talked about what was in the clams, but now this is the surface of the clam, and you could see that there are other life on them, these oysters growing on top of the clam. So it was obviously a fairly protected area to harbor all this marine life.
Yeah, David, too. The fascinating thing about when we're looking at this, and of course we're looking at the clams there, but also that layer in the mancos that we were for 12 to 18 inches, but all of these filter feeders, and as you point out, and what fascinates me is that the diversity of these filter feeders and the scarcity of fish scales and or fish bones. That when you found some, but it's such a scarce finding, but then this thing must have been, just consider what I was looking at it today was about 300 miles, and I'm following the Manco Shale from Salinas, Utah, over to Montrose, Colorado. And if you look at 300 miles, maybe 20 miles wide. So that's 300, that's what, is that 300? How many miles is that? So that's 300 times 10 would be 3,000. Yeah, 3,000 square miles, 3,000 to 6,000 square miles of Manco Shale. And my guess is this is what we find wherever you go in the Manco Shale. So it was huge, but relative to the inland sea, of course it's still big, but not like that total surface.
So it wasn't just the clams that we found. We did find some ammonites, and as I said, pretty much the good stuff we left for the museum.
The sound is on Zoom, but
go ahead, Robert.
no, go ahead, David.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt. Here's an ammonite, spiny ammonite that we found. There was tons of this stuff that we saw in the Mancos. So it wasn't just the clams we saw. No mosasaurs, by the way, but a lot of other things they may have fed on. This picture here I took to show you. So imagine we're on the top of one of those elevations, and here's part of, a very fractured part of an ammonite, all fragmented. And this one went back to the museum, but we did put some consolidated on it, and we're able to go unroof it, go underneath it, and pull it out. And that's being held after it was removed in I think Dave's hand, just to show that these things are retrievable. Again, we didn't have the right stuff. We're going to have plaster and stuff like that to really do serious collecting. Although a lot of specimens were found both up in the cliffs and down on the shale here. So that kind of concludes that part of our trip. And before I leave that, any other comments, Jordan or Robert or Jerry?
So the last 2 days, we talked about finding up in the Neslin. It was exploratory. It was I thought it was really cool. The Neslin has sort of limited outcropping, and no one had ever prospected it for dinosaurs before, or really any kind of fossil. So I thought that was really fun to burst that bubble. And the last 2 days, one of the students, Margie, found a ceratopsian horn core that they were able to get out. So that was exciting that the museum got to go home with a diagnostic bit of dinosaur.
Absolutely. So all good things come to an end, and this is our departure here. So we left going through the San Rafael, and you could see it on the left in the distance, and the road cuts on the right. And then, of course, we had to do the obligatory tourist shot here. Here's the crew congratulating themselves on a great trip. On the left, you could see the way we left. So we went back actually in this triangular fashion through Farron, Utah, visiting a good friend of Jerry's who is a rock hound and very knowledgeable about the area. This is the view heading out towards Farron. I wanted to show this because you could see the Morrison Formation in the distance, that
and it's right in the center.
Yeah, brownish gray area, which is pretty spectacular in and of itself. So it's just every place you turn there's something. So that kind of the end of our road trip. It wouldn't have been possible without the courtesy and the help of Josh, and Dave is his chief preparator, and that's who Jerry and I spent most of our time with. They're very patient. Obviously, Robert and Jordan are sort of our walking Wikipedias. They're able to ask them everything about anything.
Always go with a geologist.
Yes, exactly. Lessons learned.
I learned a lot of great stuff from Robert walking around in that the muddy stuff in the Tonka. He called that gumbo, and that's one of the most useful geologic descriptive terms I've ever heard.
Oh my gosh!
I think Robert told me to throw 80% of what I thought I found away because it was nothing, and it saved me a lot of carrying of rocks home. But I'll tell you, it was not just our folks, but the museum folks, and actually all these other volunteers and students. They're obviously walking funds of knowledge themselves. So it was just incredible learning opportunity for us. So I think that's it. Now, Jerry, do you want to try to show your videos? They're just a couple minutes.
Well, one thing I wanted to say, because I think it's so important, and I'm sorry that Josh was not able to visit with us this evening. but the working with the USU and these folks has opened up a lot of potential for us, for those of us who would like to do more work with dinosaurs, or whether it's in the Mesozoic, as such, broadly in the Mesozoic. These folks are more than willing to work with us and are open to our being part of what they're doing. Plus, there's opened up other opportunities just by working, of course, with the USU, but also with NHMU, which is the Natural History Museum of Utah in Salt Lake City, and working with those guys. And I know Greg Carr knows BJ Nichols as I do, but BJ has been very much proponent of our getting to know other people. Kirkland, for instance, and some opportunities may come up in next June, and seeing some things. But I have to say that having these relationships, I think, will be very useful for us, and hopefully that Josh will be able to come out and present. I know there are other areas with not just us, but we have the Rice, we have the other clubs, of course, and as well as OMSI. It's just something to try to work on and put something together so that if he comes out. So, but I am so thankful for Josh and allowing us to be part of this, and for you guys for participating. And I wish we had more. And I hope that we will be able to have more of our membership involved in this work.
So it's a trip. I mean, there's a distance to travel, and
2,400 miles.
yeah,
Yeah,
you have
one very long day.
yeah,
Or two kind of long days.
18 hours.
like camping and that. But we were your ambassadors to the folks in Utah, and I think we made a good impression. Josh has already signaled that there are 3 other trips this fall and 3 or 4 next year already. So there's plenty of opportunities here to participate. And I think, Jerry, you're our point person here if you want to disseminate that or share Josh's emails here, because he is inviting club members to share this experience.
I will.
Aaron,
Go ahead.
that's it, Aaron. Thank you for the opportunity to share this.
Yeah, great trip. 11 out of 10.
Yeah. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, David.
Yeah.
And thank you, Jerry, for setting all that up. I didn't hardly have to do anything. I just had to drive.
Follow Robert.
Yeah, that is